We're here today at the Harbour School. They're our fully inclusive school here in Hong Kong, so they are the best people for us to be asking these questions to and to get more information about what it is and what it looks like. So we're live every week, so please check out our Facebook page. We have an events page. You'll see all the events that we're doing every week, and you can click interested in order to be notified directly to your phone. Ask any questions, share, send us some hearts, let us know you're out there. Anyway, so to get started, we're going to split the session into two. I really wanted to understand what is inclusion and inclusive education, and then kind of what does it really look like, I suppose. And so I think you guys are definitely the best people to be kind of delving into these areas. So to get started, what is inclusion, or to be inclusive in an educational sense?
Okay, well, I mean, the textbook definition of inclusion is to, provide educational opportunities to disabled students alongside their non-disabled peers. However, when we think about inclusion and the way that we process it is that we allow opportunities for every student to be met where they are in the classroom, whether that means that they need support or that means that they need extensions of their academic learning. So it's not just about providing instruction to disabled students alongside non-disabled students. It's really about ensuring that all students are met where they are so that they can meet the potential that they have individually.
Okay. Yeah, and just to add to that, I also want to bring about that gifted students are students who are typically not students who are considered to have special need, but honestly, being gifted or extraordinarily gifted is a special need itself. And so we have here at the school, we have a lot of students and we have programs for students like that. So within the whole spectrum of childhood, I would say.
Yeah. And gifted, can I ask, because I know that it's quite a topical topic as such at the moment, and a lot of people are kind of banding it around.
Yeah.
Are you able to explain what gifted means? Because they do.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it should say what it is, but I just wondered if there was a way in which to kind of explain gifted.
So here at the school, we define that as somebody who's 24 months ahead in a subject area or in a content area or more. There's a textbook definition. I don't know if there's an IQ. I think it's something like 140, but I would have to check how it is for children.
It's usually about 10 to 20 points above the average, which is anywhere from 130 and above.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the technical definition of gifted. But we know that all children come in different shapes and sizes, and not all are created equal. And so essentially, when we think about gifted or advanced learners, we think not only academically but creatively. Students who are talented as well in some areas that exceed their peers, and sometimes it also comes with challenges. So students who are gifted, we also see students who are what is now called twice exceptional. Those students who are gifted in certain areas like mathematics or language arts, but then have disabilities included in that, such as organizational and planning, and things of that nature. So there's it's a spectrum, so to speak, as is all learning.
Yeah.
Really.
Awesome. So why would a school need to be inclusive?
Well, I think it's important to recognize, I personally think that a school needs to be inclusive because humanity is inclusive. I don't really know that many individuals these days. We all know somebody with perhaps autism or with perhaps a learning difficulty. And I think it's just responsible for a school to kind of mirror that. If you have a very homogeneous setting for school, then you're not necessarily preparing a student or a child to be in a place later on where they might have to adjust the way that they communicate with someone or develop the right EQ skills or emotional quotient that they need to be able to do that. And that's something that it makes somebody successful in the workplace, and it makes somebody successful just as a parent or as a family member.
Yeah.
I think it's just a good way to be a person.
It's so great that there's so much more kind of knowledge into these areas, because I can't imagine how difficult it must have been, like way back when in school, and even like when I was at school, like how much wasn't really available for anybody outside of the norm. So it's so important that we're understanding more and more along this spectrum that we're able to kind of have these areas of support, like inclusive education.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a global economy. We live in a world where, we're no longer tied by our boundaries of, where we live or what we do. And that being the case, it's really important in terms of, 21st century skills and being able to navigate that world, to understand difference and to understand excellence and to understand where you fit into different situations and different groups so that you can effectively pursue what your goals are in those environments.
Yeah. Cool. What is the difference? Because I've seen some things about partial inclusion and full inclusion. What's the difference with those?
Okay.
So I can tell you, at our school, for instance, programmatically, partial inclusion is basically means that students attend mainstream classes to the degree in which they're able. So if students can contact the general education instruction and curriculum with some supports or with a one-to-one teacher, then they're included in that particular setting. So you may be able to, you may have skills in mathematics, but lack the very basics in phonetics and grammar and literacy. And so you may be included in mathematics classes with the general population of students, and then you may receive some additional supports in literacy. So, so that's kind of our framework for partial inclusion. And in terms of full-time inclusion, basically students are provided with supports within the classrooms in order to ensure that they're meeting the academic rigor of the classroom setting, or other behavioral and social supports with a one-to-one teacher as well.
I also want to point out, though, that inclusion really should be a culture. And so that we believe that strongly, and by that I mean not just the technical aspect. Amoy did a wonderful job of describing the technical aspect of it in the classroom, outside of the classroom, but it's also about having a broad range of opportunities for lots of different kinds of students. So are you a school that only defines success in terms of strength in literacy and math? Well, that's wonderful, but then you're not really being inclusive to those who are excellent in terms of music or art or in terms of leadership skills. So I think that's really important to have, just to recognize all those opportunities need to be pretty much almost as valuable as just the academics, so to speak. Although I would argue that music is an academic subject, actually. It's not something that I would necessarily excel at.
But no, me neither. Definitely not singing.
Right, exactly.
So what child excels in an inclusive environment? So we kind of spoke around that spectrum, gifted versus, I suppose, learning delays.
Yeah.
I suppose I know the answer to this already.
Yeah, I know, it's terrible, right? It sounds, it's very predictable, but I'm going to say that every child does, just because if by nature of what I just said in terms of the inclusive culture, you want a school that has all of those areas in which people can succeed, then hopefully there's something that's a good fit for everyone.
Right.
I'll tell you, perhaps maybe the contentious thing might be that families who don't find that it's a good fit are honestly families who are uncomfortable with the idea, who think that an inclusive school is a school that is simply a school for kids with special needs.
Right.
Now, I understand why that might be, and that's probably because historically the definition of inclusive education was born in relation to special education opportunities.
Yeah.
But that's not how we define it here at the Harbour School. I mean, maybe we've co-opted the definition, so to speak, but I just think it's kind of the responsible thing to say. So inclusive education should have opportunities and systems and processes for kids who are gifted, as well as kids who are mainstream or typical or simply just shy or withdrawn, or who are learning English for the first time, as well as kids who maybe have some learning difficulty.
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important for us to be doing sessions like this to understand, because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding around topics like inclusive, and I think you're correct. People just assume it's one way, and actually it's a whole broader picture, and it's really interesting. So this is why we are with you today, and very grateful, because that's another thing. Some people may say that inclusion would naturally hold the class back to the learning speed of the slowest child. So how would you respond to that perception?
Well, there's the way that we talk about and the way that we implement inclusion is that we don't hold the class back to the lowest speed. What we do is we give opportunities for our teachers to collaborate with one another in joint planning sessions to allow them to really look at the different levels of need in their class, to be able to differentiate their materials accordingly so that all of the students' needs are met, so that when they're planning, they plan for extended activities and opportunities or deeper learning or different ways for students with advanced needs to express their knowledge in certain areas, as well as providing scaffolding and breaking down instruction in areas where students who have those learning difficulties can also understand and gain the content of information that's being provided. So I think that the best way to do that is through ongoing collaboration with teachers and professional development to help them to ensure that they're covering all learners in their class.
So it's very individualized learning, really, and kind of being able to assess where each of the students are and therefore how they do the teaching in that environment.
Yeah, that's true. It's very personalized. Just to also add to what Amoy said, I think that, that there is the danger of that happening, because I think teachers at heart are really good human beings, and they want to make sure that everybody's getting something out of their lesson.
Yeah.
However, ideally you would want that to be happening within a system, teaching and learning to be happening within a system that has all those supports in place for teachers. So you want to look at the resource allocation of a program. So if a school says they're inclusive, they need to say, okay, yeah, we do have somebody who is in charge of ensuring that teachers are feeling supported from a gifted perspective, or teachers are feeling supported within a ratio perspective, or within in terms of other people who are experts in the field in terms of special education. And then in that sense, the teacher has a support so that they're not feeling like they're trying to fix something on their own.
That makes
You really
sense.
need to have a culture of that happening, and then the support from the administration, I think, too. So it's really the degree to which the administration enforces all of those parts that makes a sort of culture of inclusivity.
I totally
Makes
get
it
that.
appropriate.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. It's like from the top all the way down.
That's
and
right.
all the support levels. It's not just the child. It's actually how much the teachers get.
Yeah,
that
in terms of the
support.
systems that are already set in place, and that really is what we feel is our job to do.
Oh, cool. And how far along do you think Hong Kong are with supporting inclusive models in the schools, especially maybe in comparison with the rest of the world? Like,
Well, I think Hong Kong has come to a place where they understand that there is a need for different levels of support within their school systems. I think that they are working really hard, and a lot of conferences and things that I've gone to with local Hong Kong officials and educators, that they're working really diligently on trying to provide for those needs. But I feel like they don't quite have all the necessary resources just yet. So I think that they're coming, they're investing a lot of time and effort into it. The universities are doing that with their teacher programs. But I think they do have some time to come along in terms of resources.
okay. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I think that Hong Kong, everybody's
Everywhere.
disadvantaged by the fact that we live in the abundance of information.
Yeah.
So parents, for the
Yeah.
first time in a long time, are extremely savvy consumers. Everybody has an opinion as to the kind of methodology of teaching and so on and so forth, and that's from parents. And that's a good thing, because I think it forces us in education to sort of be on the top of our game.
True.
Personally, I think that we're fortunate in Hong Kong in terms of the information that we have, in terms of the fact that there are systems in place that the government is putting in. So we do some work with the Hong Kong Academy for Gifted Education, HKAGE. So they do have some places. Is it perfect? No, but not every system is perfect.
Yeah.
But I really, as a matter of fact, I appreciate the way that Hong Kong legislators and the Educational Bureau is really trying to do right by that.
Yes.
Of course, it's slow
Fantastic.
sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah.
That's fantastic. Cool. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. It's like, I don't know where to, I've got more questions I want to ask, but just so that you know, today we're joined by Christine Greenberg, who's the prep and primary principal at the Harbour School Hong Kong, and with Dr. Amoy Hugh Penny, who's the director of inclusive education here within the school. And we're talking about inclusion. What is it and what does it look like? So please do ask us any questions, send us a like, let us know you're out there. I kind of wanted to go on now to what does inclusion look like.
Okay.
I think this is a pretty interesting part, So in education terms, like how is it different from the kind of mainstream education when you're looking at an inclusive environment?
So first of all, I think one of the issues that I come across sometimes when I'm talking to people about it is that they assume that in mainstream education everybody is the same. In the sense of, oh, well, it's mainstream. It's a mainstream school, so there's nobody here with special needs. That is absolutely not true. I can tell you from talking to administrators, from talking to past parents and students, et cetera, that we've accepted after a few years being in a mainstream school that is absolutely not true.
Okay.
So what I would argue is that an inclusive school should have a system by which to determine that there are opportunities for students to show you what they're great at and what
Okay.
they're also needing to work on.
Okay.
And sometimes maybe in the most typical sense of mainstream education, there's not so many opportunities for that to happen, because maybe they're used to the situation where the teacher is teaching to only the middle, or teaching the same lesson to everybody. And if you do that, then you're not really going to know how many people are kind of behind, or how many people are way ahead. You're only going to identify that child maybe as a problem child because maybe they're having behavioral difficulties because they're bored, or they simply are just within 18 months of understanding.
Right.
So I think that's a really important thing to say, because people usually say, well, you know, my child's in a mainstream school, or no people with special needs. It's absolutely not true with that. So I think one of the biggest differences in inclusive education is that you need to have the systems in place, and you need to see that as a parent. I would say, I'm imagining this is for parents,
Yes.
I guess. So you want to make sure that if a school's saying that they're inclusive, that they have all these other aspects and all these other opportunities for a wide range of students,
Okay.
rather than someone saying that they're inclusive, but they actually really just define success in this one narrow way.
Okay.
And I mean, in terms of practically in the classroom, what that looks like is every aspect of instruction and the classroom environment that you have to plan very carefully for that, right? For every aspect of that. So that includes not only the academic structure, it includes kind of decreasing barriers for all students. So, and when I say that, I mean things like understanding a little bit about child development, knowing that a 5-year-old can sit still for 5 minutes and not expecting them to sit for 10 or 15. You know, breaking up instructions so that people have hands-on opportunities to engage in, you know, inquiry-based and problem-based learning. You know, understanding basically your audience, you know, your students, and adjusting your teaching methods and styles to those students' needs, as opposed to forcing a idea of what teaching should look like onto a group of students who are then not receptive to that. So that means that there's constant reflecting on your practice, adjusting of your teaching strategies, you know, really planning to ensure that every type of learner has the opportunity to show what they know, and identifying also areas in the environment that may make a difference to students as well. So, I mean, I know a lot of preschool and early educators like to put letters and numbers and all kinds of things on their walls, but for some students that's extremely distracting. And then you know, when they're not attending and they're 5 and they're looking everywhere, it becomes difficult to then proceed with an entire group of students. So looking at all aspects of teaching, not just the academics, but also the environment, and also the social emotional needs of the students, right?
Right.
So ensuring that students have opportunities to learn emotional regulation, to have breaks and time to be able to kind of just digest what's happening in their day. So those are all things that need to be planned for and adjusted for. So it's very fluid in that sense.
Yeah, and I know adults who need help with emotional regulation.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Exactly.
I also find that amusing when parents talk about their kids like, oh, they can't sit still for a second. And I'm like, and where do you think
I
they
can't
get that
either.
from? You know, I'm like, well, they're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think lots of distraction. You're correct. Like a classroom setup can be, for some you think it's so colourful and lovely for kids, and for some children it's like so overwhelming. Then they can't concentrate or focus enough on what's going on. So in an actual classroom environment, like here at Harbour School, like what would it look like? Do we sit at tables, or like do we all kind of go into groups? Like,
Combination.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting because we have a combination of things. The teachers really make decisions based on their classes.
Okay.
So we have one classroom, and because we have these adjustable, movable walls, they can set them up in different configurations for the term or the year. But some teachers have carved out spaces in their classes where you have bean bags and quiet, like kind of reading areas. In some of the middle school, they have like individual desks so that a student doesn't necessarily always have to sit with the group because they may find that very distracting. Opportunities to wear, you know, headphones to kind of block out additional distracting noises and things like that. So the configurations are quite different based on the actual students in that class. And in our lower primary, they give lots of opportunity for short breaks and movement and things like that throughout their day. So
yeah, we have a range of seating options. So some students can prefer to stand. So we have some desks that are sort of a different height so that they can stand while they're working. You don't really need to sit down while you're working. Some people can lie down. If they're reading something or working on something or working within a group, it's quite a relaxed atmosphere. And, you know, and some classes have opted for their students to be able to take their shoes off before they go in. I think it's really important that in the classroom, if you're requiring a certain level of rigor, I think people should be roughly as comfortable as they possibly can. Of course, that's not all the time. I mean, of course, if it's time to do the presentation or they have some kind of, they have like a test or something, but usually it's more the presentation that they have that's formal. Then people get dressed and they stand and they're ready to be formal. There's absolutely that, but that doesn't have to happen all the time.
Okay, oh cool, that's very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I've seen in the other campus when I've done a tour before, and you see it kind of in life, and you're like, oh my god, this is really cool, and it just all works. And I've seen the
Yeah.
standing up kind of desks as
Right.
well. It's very cool, and I see now with adults, there's so much more in like co-working spaces that are kind of doing that for adults too. A lot of people standing, having the balls to sit on, and having like sessions where you can go and sit on a and chill out on a beanbag or whatever, because you can be more creative to kind of like change your
Absolutely. I mean, I always think as an adult, why do we hold a company like Google
Yeah.
in such high esteem when they think outside of the box in terms of the way that they conceive of office spaces, but then we put our children in schools where they have to sit and have their shoes on and have sort of a very sort of different environment from that. If we know that
Yeah.
that's what companies do in order to, they have all kinds of fun parts in their environment,
Yeah.
then why aren't we doing that in schools also?
Yeah, so true. Anyway, that's why we're going to be going down the slide in a second. Oh, we've got a question, guys. Sorry. So, does inclusion support social emotional learning, or do parents need to handle this at home? Thank you, Michelle, for the question.
I think absolutely. I think,
Okay.
well, first of all, I think any school, mainstream, what you want to call it that, I think any school should support social emotional learning.
Yeah,
And especially, I think empathy is a really important
so important
area
Yeah.
that we don't do enough of. And one of the things that I always argue, not argue, but in support of having a diverse community in terms of culture and in terms of learning, is I think that it's really hard for students to come from a place of understanding or a place of
Yes.
of all that, rather than tolerance. I mean, sometimes there's a curriculum called Teaching Tolerance, and the curriculum is great, but I just always kind of cringe at the word tolerance, because
Yeah.
you're not just, I always
Putting
like to
up with
say
it.
I tolerate broccoli,
Yeah.
but like I really empathize with chocolate, because I think it's really important that kids know that coming from a place of understanding, this is your perspective, but you're not going to learn that in a place that's absolutely exactly like you.
Same. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you only learn that, in situ,
Yeah.
in the situation with
So
different
true.
people.
Yeah, and in terms of social emotional learning, some of the things that we do is, here at the school we have a program called Soul Shop,
Okay.
which helps to teach children a little bit about conflict resolution and how to negotiate problems and how to correct those things when they happen, to communicate
Okay.
more appropriately how they're feeling and how other people's behaviors impact them. In addition to that, for students who really need it, we also have teach self-management. So we do like a 3-point daily check-in with some students who may need a little bit more gentle supervision and discussion with teachers outside the kind of general everyday interactions that you have in the classroom. So to help support those students, we may set a few goals for them and then check in with them in the morning to say, hey, these are the things that we're working on today, kind of following directions and, treating our friends nicely and things like
Yeah.
that. And then checking in with them at different points of the day, afternoon around recess or snack, and then at the end of the day, and then letting them know, how well they did through the course of the day and meeting some of those goals and reinforcing that
Wow.
positively. So
Yeah.
all of that is a systems that we have in place to support social and emotional needs of students. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be extensive. Some students need that for a short period of time just to feel confident and secure in the new environment,
Yeah.
or in a classroom that's a little bit bigger than what they've been used to in preschool.
Yeah, yeah.
So, going from 18 to 24, something like that can be overwhelming for students. So,
Yeah.
so we try to put some of those things in place naturally as a part of our regular programming.
But going back to Michelle's question, I think it's important for both areas
I
to
agree,
be addressing
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe importantly that it's important for a parent who ensures that there's a little bit of alignment in terms of your values
That's what I
and the
was gonna
school's
say.
values.
Yeah. And I think this is where it's important when they come to understand what the schools actually stands for and how it's run and what all these levels are that are included, even that you're explaining now. So it's not just the child. I think that's so
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's like the staff and then management, and this is like what everybody believes in. And if you agree with that, that's a fantastic alignment to have, right?
Yes.
Thanks, Michelle. Oh,
Wow.
oh, thank you so much. Oh, Maria, thank you very much for your question. Can you be inclusive and rigorous?
Yes,
Ooh.
although I did actually kind of cover that earlier in the discussion, because in inclusive school, how we define it here at the Harbour School is a school that has rigor enough, especially for gifted students. I mean, we have a student right now who's 5 years old and is able to do 5th grade math. So so just to show you, and he has a program to be able to do it. I think I stopped at 6th grade. Yeah, well, this is live, so there's proof of this admission now. But anyway, I think the point is that a responsibly inclusive school should have those systems in place because it recognizes that people who are gifted or academically advanced also should have those areas in which they can shine. Absolutely. So we do have students like that. The other thing that I want to say too is that an inclusive, I don't know so much if it's being inclusive, but something that we do here is we really challenge our teachers to be able to have a diversity of assessments. Now, anybody in teaching can tell you that assessments are really important. And absolutely, you know, we have a regular spelling test, a paper and pencil, et cetera, and we have a regular math tests. But we also ask our teachers to have a range of options by which they can show that a student has mastered something. So, for example, we have a, in order to show that a student has acquired research skills and presentation skills, there's the rigor involved with having to give a speech in front of a room full of parents and dignitaries at our Global Issues Conference in the 5th grade, for example. Now, that is to simply show the research. So perhaps in another place it might be that the child will present and all of that and do all of that in the classroom, but there's the rigor where there's the element where it's kind of increased when you're in a public domain and able to do that. So that's something that we think the rigor is definitely there.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. So what else we're going to ask? We're so excited. We spoke about the kind of parents. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but what are the things that parents should be asking when they are looking for an inclusive school and whether a school is inclusive? What are the kind of top things that they should be asking or looking out for?
Well, I think they should be asking a few questions. One of them being, you know, how does the school administration support their teachers to be inclusive? Because you can say that you're inclusive, and you know, teachers can attempt to do those things, and you know, in many places, general educators have kind of been forced to do those things without any additional training or you know, schooling. So it really goes back to how much the administration to some extent supports those teachers in doing those things and including students. So I would say a little bit about professional development, a little bit on the side of you know, who are resources in the school that they can gain information from. So for instance, here we have learning support teachers who can provide consultation to teachers through their joint collaborations and lesson planning. We have, you know, gifted educators who can then consult with teachers on how to extend activities and provide depth and breadth in their lessons. So it really goes back to, like Christine was saying, that supported environment for teachers to be able to really implement those things in the classroom. Because you can easily get caught up in the, well, we'll give this type of work to this student and this type of work to this student, and no one is actually learning the same content or not really getting to, you know, all of the same goals that we're wanting to achieve.
I think it's important to suss out a school that is inclusive in the textbook definition, which is, you know, is it simply proximity, meaning they're working alongside peers? But I think you can see if it's that or something that really truly embraces the culture of inclusion in the sense of, is there a plan for students moving forward after they go to school, after they're finished with school? One way you can ascertain that is if the school has the systems in place, kind of like we have the Director of Inclusion, Inclusive Education, and that's something that I'm always really good at, is she works with the teachers and she also works with parents about that. How are we preparing to get your child out of the Harbour School to the real world, whether that's university or to the next school that you're attending in a different country? I mean, you know, we have a bunch of third culture children, and so we know that they're not always going to be in this environment necessarily, so how are we preparing them for that?
Because it's, you know, inclusion is not a program or, you know, it's something like that. It's really an attitude, an overall attitude. It really is about how much does the school environment support that as well. How much do, you know, are parents involved or educated about it? How much are students involved or educated about it? And we really set out to do a lot of parent education around inclusion and diversity and gifted education and all those other things. along with a lot of the other things that we do. But we also do that with our student body. So, regularly when they have assemblies, we ensure to include information on difference or how things connect to our learner goals, being integrated amongst others. So some of those social skills aspects, being innovative or being resilient, how do we overcome challenges, and so that everyone can relate to those things through our learner goals, but then really tying in to, how there's difference among everyone and how all of us, can work together to meet the needs of each other.
Two more questions.
Oh, wow.
Love it. So thank you, Maria. Are there programs easily accessible? Could we share links?
What programs?
So do you mean by, maybe she means by some more information?
She mentioned something about SEL.
Social
emotional learning.
Yeah. So maybe
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a link that you guys mentioned earlier, and we can put it up on the comments. So that
There's
everybody
there's
can-
some curriculum around. I
Yeah.
mean, there's some curriculum definitely that you can look into.
The Jed Baker series?
Some that we use are the zones of regulation, as well as something called social detectives. There's literature by Maria Winter Garcia, and there's some websites that can point you in those directions. So zones of regulations is a really big one. Social thinking is the other one. I think the website is socialthinking.com is one of them that has a lot of materials.
We'll be getting those links from
Great.
Tanya. and
Well,
we'll
one
get
thing
them
I
up.
do want to say, because it sounds like parents are also very keen to work on some areas with their children.
Yes.
I think it's also important to ensure that you have peers involved in when you're working with your own child at home. Maybe if they have to, improve in an area in terms of social emotional, it's really hard sometimes if you're just working with your child one-to-one,
Right.
because that's not necessarily the setting in which
Yes.
social emotional skills or difficulties will emerge.
Right.
Yeah.
So I always say, make sure that it's involving other children as well.
Okay, yeah, that's good advice.
To some point.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you, Maria. And then we've got a question from Top Schools. How challenging is it to find qualified, experienced teachers to support inclusion programs?
Oh, it's so challenging.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a good
Come
question.
on, Top Schools.
Really? Okay, so I mean, I can tell you a
absolutely
little bit
challenging.
because those are really a lot of the teachers that I
Yeah.
employ. I think that part of it is not necessarily that every teacher comes with a huge bag of experience with that,
Yeah.
but that teachers are open
Yeah.
to the idea and the
Belief,
ethos
yeah.
of inclusion, that teachers are open to learning how to do things differently, that they're not stuck in this box or idea that, and I had some difficulty with this when I first started college teaching and things, being like the sage, or high school teaching, the sage on stage where you're kind of lecturing to everybody
Yeah.
and they're just kind of listening along and nodding their heads. So really learning to break out of that kind of mold and that old kind of thought about how teaching should happen. I'm the instructor, you're the student, you should learn everything from me, but having more of that interactive feeling and that interactive discourse with students, and being able to be flexible enough to change strategies when something isn't
Yes.
working.
Yeah.
So really looking for those types of individuals who are willing to change and be fluid and are willing to really work on their practice. So I think the difficulty comes in when you have someone who may have been in the field for a very long time, who is very experienced, but does things one way,
Yeah.
and then decides that they really don't want to change the way of doing things.
Yeah.
So it's really important for inclusion to work, to be open and flexible in our thinking and our implementation of our teaching, our pedagogy, really.
Which is like how we employ for everything, isn't it? Just like the right
Yeah.
attitude. You
You're-
can't put.
you really
a price
hope,
on
yeah.
that. The rest you can teach. You
This
can
is true.
kind of give, but having that right belief system that fits is like the most important
Yeah.
part, right?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, if there's one thing I learned about interviews, it's that people will be able to, the fact that somebody will say something is not necessarily mean that they actually mean it. And I don't mean
Yeah.
to say that people are being deceitful. I think honestly they really think that they are able to do that and that they
Right.
can do that, but it's
In reality.
It's in reality that, as we know here at the school, in any school actually, in reality, what's important is that you have the systems in place to sort of retrain people in terms of your school culture and the baseline that you want. for
I think when
everybody who's
you've
working
got,
there.
like you do here anyway, when you've got the systems in place, I suppose that's almost sticks out like a sore thumb when
Yeah.
it doesn't fit in, so it becomes easier.
That's why it's important, I
Yes,
think, to have a really clear mission.
Yes.
And make sure that you have people in positions of leadership.
Yeah.
And I'm including teachers in this.
Yeah.
To be on mission in terms of that, because if
Yeah.
you have one person who's kind of who wants to but is not really interested in
Yeah.
being that kind of an inclusive educator, then they need to see that everybody else around them is sort of mirroring that.
Yeah. I'll finish on asking, outside the classroom, what are some of the other areas where an inclusive environment is rewarding for students? I
Oh,
suppose life.
wow. Yeah, life.
Well, we have so many different
Yeah.
activities that we do throughout the school year that include everyone in our school. Like, no one is told that they can't come or they can't attend. So, I mean, things like talent shows, our play, which is Christine's like most favorite part of the school
Yes.
year, I think, is the school play,
Yeah.
where students who may not excel as much in their studies really outshine and do really well in those mediums. So, I mean, we have such a variety of activities, from our STEAM night where,
Yeah.
Kids come who are really not into math and really enjoy and love the activities that we do during that evening, because there's so much interaction, so many hands-on things that they can do that don't necessarily involve the crunching of numbers, right? Applying mathematics. So I think that we do a good job of having a lot of different activities through the school year where everybody can feel like, they can be a part of it.
Something
Yes.
too.
So we have an inclusive theater program, and we have an inclusive sports
what I
program.
have, yeah.
And
Theater.
and the thing is, it sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? Because usually something like a theater program that's inclusive, it's like, what, you let anybody in? That's,
Yes.
that's bananas. But if you ask any of our parents, and if you ask any of our students, and we had a musical called Bugsy Malone last year, and it was phenomenal. And what I've seen is, it goes back to the original question that we were discussing earlier, is, is an inclusive school sort of detrimental to somebody who's actually really, who needs that rigor? And what we've seen is that it's been amazing in the theater program. I mean, we had Bugsy Malone, and what we gave opportunities to kids who didn't have those opportunities before.
Yeah.
And even if they had a very small role,
it doesn't have to be-
it was the world, it made a world of difference to that child.
Yeah.
And I like to think of that, because now today, I mean, we all have schools where it's always the top 3 or 4 actors or actresses who get the parts, and that's wonderful.
drama club.
But how many
Yeah.
of us have schools can say, actually, as a child, a student graduates and they say, that was the experience that I had that turned me into an actor and actress.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that. I mean, originally we had maybe only 15 people who auditioned and play. This year we have 50, so we had to do Annie because we had to have
ensemble
lots of
cast.
Yeah, you need all the
and
roles.
it's really exciting and it's challenging for everybody. But as an inclusive environment, it's really nice because the camaraderie
perfect.
and the
Yeah.
camaraderie amongst all the people in the cast
Yeah.
Different
is really
ages.
phenomenal.
Yeah, because also even behind the scenes stuff.
Yes,
you know?
behind the
So all the
scenes.
lighting and the
Right.
scripting and the, there's lots
Right.
that they could be doing. So
Yeah.
it's really it's very exciting. I'm a huge advocate for theatricals.
theater,
though,
yeah.
I think for kids.
And
it's
also
just
when people
amazing.
see that they're working towards a common goal,
Yeah.
somebody who perhaps has some social, emotional difficulties and everything, they really get with the program. They
Yeah.
literally get with the program, and you see
Yeah.
it because the light's on them. But a school that wouldn't give that child an opportunity is not
It's
giving
good
them that
dust,
opportunity
yeah.
to say, I'm actually worthy of being on stage also.
Yeah.
It's been really nice. It's been
Yeah.
really nice to see the school be a fork in the road
Yeah.
for those children in terms of, I'm not just somebody who struggles in math or
Yeah.
in terms of literacy. I'm also somebody who can be on stage and can learn to sing.
It's a big
Yeah.
confidence booster. I mean, I know over years, my daughter also attends a school, and over time, you go from being, shy individual, not wanting to talk in public and give presentations, to actually being on stage, and then deciding, well, you know what, I prefer doing makeup and hair backstage.
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
but there's
Yeah.
even those opportunities for students where, they may not want to be the center of attention, but they feel like they have some creative way in which they can
Can add
participate
to,
and
yeah.
add to the entire production. And I think that's, also really important,
Could she not have been here this morning when we arrived, wet from the rain? We were like,
To do
"Where's
hair
the
and makeup."
So we could have used her skills earlier. Cool, we've got another question. Thank you very much. Maria, so how you access children for gifted or other, how do you access children?
Assess, probably.
Assess.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, assess.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Maria. Sorry, Maria. I was like, how do you assess children for gifted or other benefits?
Oh, well, we students who are gifted may come with their own assessments already.
Oh, okay, they've done.
Yes, they may,
Sometimes.
not always, sometimes,
Okay.
but some parents do come with those kinds of evaluations in place already, or some kind of a diagnosis about that. And then the other way that we look is we have assessments where we determine that if a child is, this is how we define it, not necessarily in terms of giftedness, but in terms of access to our extension programs, is that if they're 24 months ahead in a subject area. And so
Okay.
we have a few assessments that determine that.
That allow them
Do you want to add to
see.
that?
Yeah, I mean, we look at a whole body of students' work too,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Okay.
not just, one assessment or one point in time. We're looking at, sometimes for students, what type of work they can produce, what kind of barriers may exist to them producing that work. So, because oftentimes you'll have students who are gifted but underachieving. And so that creates its own set of, concerns from parents, and then also, to try and get to that potential.
Yeah.
So looking at, kind of what the potential is of the student and how we can provide opportunities in the classroom even for some of those extensions that they may not necessarily be ready for the 2-year leap of an additional program where,
Right.
they're doing, hands-on math and applied math one week and online learning another week. So we try to look at those opportunities for students, and finding those different areas where they excel, and not just the one definition of
what
giftedness
is-
through an IQ score or something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
I suppose, yeah, it's again easier because you've got the setup already in place to be able to see that come through. But I think that's a huge point.
Yeah.
There's so many children that are actually gifted, but because they haven't had opportunities, they seem like they are behind because
Right.
they haven't had
Yeah.
the support or whatever to allow them to achieve their true goals or whatever. So, so interesting. So, wow, really good session.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. As you guys know, I've been here at the Harbour School today in Hong Kong, talking with Christine Greenberg, who's the prep and primary principal here, and to Dr. Amoy Hugh Penny, who's the director of inclusive education. It's been an amazing session. I don't know if there's any more questions from viewers. You can ask at any time because we'll always answer. Just before we kind of wrap it up, I did want to let you guys know that the Harbour School have a couple of open days coming up, and so I was hoping that Christine could just share a bit more information for those that
Sure.
might want to come and see it in action and come find out more information.
Sure. On Saturday, October 27th, we have an open day for Harbour Village, which is our prep program in Kennedy Town.
Yes.
And people can access that and sign up for it on our website. And then on Saturday, November 17th, is our open day here at the Grove for
Oh,
grades
nice.
1 to 12.
Okay, you can do the slide.
Yeah.
So we'll put that information and the link up for you guys also on Facebook, so you can access if you want to RSVP for that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've
Sure.
really had a great
Welcome.
session, and it's so interesting. I love it. We could go on forever and ever, but we will come to an end. I did want to just let you know that on Thursday we will be going live, and we're really excited to have the Australian children's author Andy Griffith. So
Oh, we love Andy
Yeah,
Griffith.
so
Yeah.
cool. I know I'm going to have to get him to sign that
Yeah,
child book.
yeah.
So we'll be talking to him. He's promoting his latest book in the Treehouse series. So we'll be live on on Thursday morning. So watch out for that on our events page on Facebook. And on Monday, we'll be back to our Monday session for ADHD and ADDD. So just learning a bit more about those and understanding a bit more and having an opportunity to ask the questions again. So thanks to everybody, and thank you both, Christine
Thank you
and
so much
Amoy.
for having
It's
us.
been
Thank
really,
you
really
for
great.
having us.
So we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.